Hello, it's day 28 of the Iran war, today on March 23rd, 2026. Donald Trump has announced this morning that there will be a 5-day period of no fighting, no war, no missiles, no attacks from the US towards Iran, under the condition of further negotiations about overall settlements taking place. So let's take this break to take a look behind the scenes. And this is what I want to do with you in this podcast episode. So hello and welcome back to the Trust Disrupt podcast. This episode is called Behind the Scenes of This War. And I'm super excited to walk you through the patterns that we can observe when we really look, A, from a different vantage point, and B, when we take a look at 4 specific areas and search and bring into awareness the patterns that we can observe. And these 4 different areas to understand what is really actually happening, the bigger picture, and how can we put that into another context. To get there, I want to walk you through the 4 layers of economy, the monetary system, society and humans, and power structures. So these are the 4 elements that we're going to walk through. And yes, grab a coffee or tea, maybe a glass of water, maybe a notebook. This is going to be a longer episode. And if you have 15 to 20 minutes only now, we'll start with a summary and then we dive deeper into some more details in the different sections. Okay. So I hope you're ready and I hope you're excited, because what we see overall here is nothing more and nothing less than the world and humanity being exactly now in the transition phase from one paradigm to another paradigm. And depending on where you are with your own personal journey and different types of information sources that you follow, you may have heard this terminology. It's like we're moving into another era, we're moving into another paradigm, there's a shift. Maybe you even heard this from 3rd dimensional realm to 5th dimensional realm. It's a little bit more energetically expressed, but overall there's huge disruption of systems and infrastructure across all sectors of life. And we're moving from something very old into something very new that we have not seen, all of us who are living on this planet right now. So there is a lot of new things, and our brain, our conscious mind struggles a little bit to capture it all. That's why I did some work for you. I went down probably 15 to 20 different rabbit holes across the last 3-4 days and pulled all of the data together, because I already had this when I was observing what was happening across the last 10, 12, 14 days. I had this intuitive knowing. It's like, okay, I kind of know what is going on, and I wanted to better understand it, A, for myself, but also to be able to share with you and to express it in a bit more structured way, so that you can also connect the dots and find some more meaning, find your own interpretation of that. All right. Now it's more or less just a transition. But how? Okay. When we look at history in general, and what I've taken a look at the last 150-ish years, because that is enough to see the pattern, okay? To see the pattern that is playing out again now, just a little bit different version. And the different parameters that we're going to deep dive into a little bit are mainly technology. So what type of emergence of a new technology has there been and is there now? So what is a pattern with regards to this topic that we can see? Then there is one stream that we're going to look into that is called resources or power struggles. Resources like we see now in energy or oil, obviously it's connected, right? And to that connected some sort of a power struggle, like who owns that or who has access, or, what is prices. Then we're going to definitely look at the monetary system or any sorts of changes or shifts that may have appeared, and what type of patterns does history teach us. And then there is the political and the world order shift. So these are the layers. And then we're obviously going to map that back to how does that connect to what we see right now? Okay, so that is what we're going to walk through. And we're going to dive into examples that will help you understand where you can trace back what in what you see now happening and playing out. Okay, so yes, we're opening this wide, and also we're going to close the circle at the end. Okay, no worries. So what we can also say that there is obviously the war going on as we perceive it through media and what we can see. And if we add the question, is that a war about what? Is that about oil or the access to it? Or is it about resources? Or is it about political power in that region or in that country? That's what usually it looks like through the media narratives and what has been reported. Some sort of a mix of that, right? Economic interests, political interests, shifts in allyship, shifts in power structures in connection to trading routes, commodities, natural resources, etc., supply chains, all of the things that are connected to that. And then obviously at some point it ties always back to you and me as the population in a certain specific region or a country, if it gets to the point that there are structural consequences of either a lack of a resource or a limited permission to use something or access or whatever it is. Okay, so that is basically what we see. The question is that all that there is, or is there more? And I want to share with you, yes, there's more. Yes, it's a war on energy, and it is a war that is not limited to energy as we see it through oil as a natural resource or further products that are created from it and the economic part of that, and then supply of oil or gas, and that turned into energy used for manufacturing, for heating, for whatever it is. Because there's different layers of energy, obviously, and funnily enough, this war on energy has the layer that I've just outmapped, but it also has the complete energetic layer when we look at what happens with the world and with humanity in the realm of frequency and human evolution. When we talk about sovereignty is a very vital element that is the process of what we're moving towards to. So let's start a little bit with the summary that I've promised you for those who don't have that much time right now. What I mean was that sovereignty, the overall transition that the whole world and humanity is in, we're moving out of an era where we had not yet rediscovered and remembered that we are sovereign beings, and we're now in the process of exactly that. Now, what does that mean? Sovereignty in that sense as the individual, also in systems, and we can hear that also in narratives when you're in text. Everything that is decentralized always has an aspect of sovereignty. The system needs to be sovereign, no single point of failure. But if you bring that back to the individual human, it means basically the same thing. It means that you are in a position where you remember that the only person who has ownership about you and your mind and your decisions and how you create your life, what you want your life and everything, your reality to look like, is in your own hands. And for some of you, that might still sound a little bit either weird or scary or not fully clear how. That is basically what I'm doing when I'm working with founders and CEOs in companies to help them move through this inner operating system shift. It's the next evolution step from that new vantage point. Then looking at a business structure or anything else helps you to make different decisions that are in alignment with the success patterns and leadership patterns of the future. Sovereignty at the core is what we're moving towards to. This is the paradigm shift. The non-sovereign way of living, having structures, meaning more hierarchy, more outer control, whether that's governmental or through corporate structures or any sort of hierarchy systems that you can think of, whether they have been serving or not so serving, right? Just understanding the concept of the systemic approach. So the old systemic approach that is not working very well anymore. And so that's why we're seeing everything in disruption. has been a non-sovereign one, which is a more controlled one, beyond the means of safety and guiding and structures, which we also need to create safety and stability. But beyond that point, that it was more limiting and hierarchically dominating versus just enabling a free development in sovereign decision making and sovereign creation of life, of business, of societies, of living on planet Earth, if you want to go into the bigger picture. So we're moving towards this, and that obviously requires a lot of changes. And that starts within you, but it also is mirrored into the systems. And what is happening now is, with that war and all of the impact points it has, and when we now start to look at history of the last 150 years, examining a little bit more the patterns of systems, okay, power structures, monetary systems, etc., then you can see that there's another inflection point right now in order to create more stability for something that will support the transition into a more sovereign era across all of the different sections I mentioned. Something else first needs to be stirred up that is constantly trying to remain and persist in the state of non-stability, because that is something that caters into that era that is ending now. And I'll leave it with that. So looking at the summary of what we're witnessing here right now, let's start with the power structures bucket. Look at what we've been witnessing across the last year, two, in a more accelerated way, and now it's getting another push. What are older or existing power structures beyond nations, like governments? Something like the EU. You have something like the OPEC. You have NATO. You have even still like the British Empire rest / Commonwealth. You have still the beloved narrative of the West against the East, very plainly, okay? But you have all of these groups where, for whatever a different purpose, a group of nations gather together in order to support interest. Usually, if you look at these are also all of them coming from a deep intention of protecting something or being able to unite in order to defend or to fight for. But usually it comes from an intention of, let us be together in this group so that we can be a stronger opponent towards X, Y, Z. And these are the idea of these power structures, is what we see not working well any longer. So some of them more, some of them less already. But the idea behind that is what we're witnessing. That is one layer. And where do we move? Where is that supposed to go? Into a more sovereign, nation-led, or maybe even territory-led. We will see where it goes, but a more sovereign, here it goes again, sovereign, national, and don't get me wrong, I don't mean like the nationalist media agenda that is pushed towards political right-wing whatever narratives. I don't mean that at all, but I mean a sovereign, nation connected, whatever nation then is, again, that's why I'm bringing also in territory, but a local focus on, can I, in a very sovereign way, make decisions and create the infrastructure and the frameworks in which I want to live here in that nation / territory. A more sovereign one that asks more the question and comes from the intention, how do I want this to be here and how can I create that? Where can I trade something? How can I define governance? Whatever it is, okay, that is more the core intention question, to go towards something like that and away from, oh, where can I find 5 other allies so that I can defend myself better? That's the paradigm shift, okay? That's where we're moving towards too. And yes, that still sounds a little bit like, oh my goodness, can that work? Could that actually work? Because that would mean also, as a consequence, we would live in a world where there's peace, because then you have the freedom and the bandwidth and choice to deal with that question and look at the world like that, and don't come from the place, from whom can I take away something to enrich myself, that, or who can I find an ally with so that I can defend myself. That's one paradigm shift that we're moving towards into now. And this is how you can see that a lot of these organizations, so now in the war, where can we see that? The whole interesting conversations you can also see in the media about NATO. Okay, who is going to come in? Trump is asking the European allies to support the Strait of Hormuz opening. All of them are saying kind of no, or I'm just going to do this or that, but I'm not going to intervene. There's strategic movement from Trump in this as well. But I'm not going to go deeper into the analysis of that. But that is where you can see, oh, interesting, this organization now, just look at that and ask yourself, whose interests are where in these conversations, okay? There is strategic intention behind that, but it's not functioning. If you look at why or for what reason NATO has been built, obviously back then after World War II, that was a different world, but, it kind of has lost the purpose because the way it was designed back then, the world today does not work in that way anymore. So the structure has not really evolved. So it's not really working any longer in the world where we are right now. Okay, just one example. Then the second layer, if we look at society, humans, you and me, what we can do. So what can we see right now? Tying it back to the war situation, what can we already see in several parts of the world? Not so much in the European section, but you can see in several Asian countries, there is energy protocols. So there's already people being sent to work in home office. Schools are partly closed or a day less to work in a week to prevent commuting, to prevent energy usage, whether that's in gas for cars or for public transportation or in school buildings in general, right? So there's measures already and regulations in a handful of countries, more in the Asian realm, which are obviously a bit more sensitive in their economic situation, economic and socio-economic situations in their countries, so that they need to respond to the situation earlier on compared to us here in Europe, for example. Europe is still operating more on the institutional and economic layers, watching either taxes or tariffs or, these types of tools are being used at the moment, not so much as in the other countries, the civilization connected behavioral measures and tools, if I want to say. And, the headlines have already started talking about energy lockdowns. There's a lot of FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, doubt that is spread. And what is that? What is the invitation here? Because that is tying back to old narratives. And yes, you can always have the practical aspect if somewhere is real scarcity of sort of a resource. Be practical about it, find a solution on top or beyond of all of that. How can you as a human, or what is the invitation to humans in such a situation, even more so versus the lockdown 5-6 years ago? Well, what are we being invited? It is exactly what I was talking about earlier, the inner sovereignty, to remain calm, to find the safety that is being taken away in the external world, find that within and connect within, and remember that you hold the capacity to navigate and that you can still choose how you want to respond to any outer circumstances. That is the invitation here, okay? And there's something else, what is also happening and supporting this transition here for humanity to move more into a sovereign state, every individual, and then obviously collectively as well. That again is tied very directly towards the Iran war, because exactly under the land of Iran, and it runs large, so it's crossing over to Iraq as well, lies a Stargate, an energy portal. If you have ever heard about Earth grids and the energetic system of the Earth, the frequency of the Earth, maybe you know that you can measure the Earth frequency in the Schumann resonance. You can look that up. There's a constant report every day where you can see changes in Earth frequency. And over time, over the last 20 years, 30 years, the overall Earth frequency has been rising. That's why more people have been what is called waking up, which means nothing else than remember things. And when you vibrate overall at a different frequency. It's like in a different radio station, okay? That means you can access different types of information because you have more access to more types of radio channels and radio stations, if you will. And the whole Earth is a whole frequency field as well. Likewise, you are as the individual being, and so is the whole collective of humanity. And there is interaction and exchange of information, if you will, radio station, broadcasting exchange, if you want a picture, between Earth and humanity. And the universe, obviously, as the planet is part of the whole universe. All right. And underneath Iran and Iraq, but majority Iran, is one of these big energy centers. Call it Stargate, call it a portal. It doesn't really matter because it's a conjunction of different frequency layers that carry different levels of information. If you think in the picture of a network, that would be like a node, like a point where different intersections or different layers intersect in one point. And because of that, there's a very high frequency. And guess what? This portal, this specific energy point underneath Iran represents, it's like one of the chakras, if you will, like the Earth has an endocrine system, and there's one of the nodes. And that one in particular represents the sovereignty nexus. And it's about resonance. When you hear and see more wordings about resonance, alignment, clarity, consciousness, and you hear me talk about this a lot as well, then this is also connected to this part of a dimension. It's also connected to everything, leadership, infrastructure, systemic things. You see, it's the same logic. It's the same idea, okay? And very interestingly, right underneath the country where the biggest war activity recently is happening, this portal connected to this topic is located, all right? So let's move on to the monetary system. What can we see here? Obviously, we know that for the past 2 years in particular, the acceleration pace has increased a lot across the last probably 18 months. The switch into a digitized monetary system overall, right? Decentralized, digitized, programmable money, the different versions where it's going, stable coins versus central bank digital currencies, tokenized assets. This change is ongoing, okay? So again, we're moving from something centralized in infrastructure, railways, payment systems, methods, even the allocation. We're moving away from a pure monetary system into an asset-based monetary system. But again, we're going from something centralized into something decentralized. And also the connection of value that you have behind something that changes, again, the systemic approach. And for that, we will take a look a little bit deeper into where has currency or value been packed to or connected to across time for humanity. There was something packed to gold that was changed, different versions of that. Then we had the whole petro-dollar, where the oil price was packed to the dollar, that ended 2024. So there's a lot of change of that. Right now we see the BRICS states, and there you can see, again, narrative, Western versus others, Eastern, Brazil, and then we have Russia and India and China and South Africa, obviously as the core of that collaborative group, working also on payment systems, on decentralized alternatives towards a dollar-based stablecoin system that we see already quite advanced in the world. But again, this is not done yet. And where does that tie into the war situation right now? Well, it's very interesting. While we see that officially the Strait of Hormuz is closed, and as far as we can see, it is closed, yet apparently, and it's not easy to find 100% confirmation, but I've been probably researching about 3 hours on that, and there's several different sources of information that seem like it's very likely that still, even though it's officially closed, Iran is or has been allowing across the last 5, 10, 12 days, here and there, ships, some sorts of orders out or through if somebody paid in Chinese yuan. That is the currency thing. If you look at fiat currencies, right, because they want more autonomy from the dollar system, especially now that the petro-dollar agreement just does not exist anymore, right? It kind of silently ended 2024. And then the other layer of this is Iran has been building across the last 5-ish years a parallel, already functioning, not fully functioning, but functioning in case of if this does not work, oh, then we have something alternative here, a decentralized structure that works every time when dollar or fiat rails have been blocked or cut, or for whatever reason this was not possible to use the official ways. There are several different structural elements already that have been created, and you can go and research. So I've done a couple of hours research around that. So it really seems like this is legit, at least to a certain extent. Probably we can't really officially see to what exact extent, but it is existing. And so there is still some very small, very limited trade and shipments and economic movements still happening, no matter what the overall narrative is and the overall situation that is like 99% is closed and is not happening and it is blocked. Yet there is a few things that are still happening. And again, what is happening? So what can work apparently if you use another currency or if you already use another technology, which is a digitized version and which is a currency that is just not dollar, in this case, Chinese yuan, okay? Which again is accessible and available as the currency in the world, the fiat currency that has been digitized for the longest time, right? So can you see where there's already ties towards the new world, towards the next step of the evolution in the system? Again, it's not fully completely organized, it's not fully regulated, but there's enough bits and pieces there already that some parts can function. And there's some sort of, again, sovereignty possible. And the last part here, before we go a bit into the review, is the economic part. And what can we see beyond the obvious, right? We obviously see the oil prices that we see going up and down depending on what Mr. Trump announced or where somebody fired a missile or whatever the action was on that day. But the question is, why does that matter beyond obviously a war situation always being more than hard and just horrible for everyone who is involved exactly on the ground, and also those involved of if resources are really so cut out that the effects on people or on a country or a region are directly affecting in a really, really bad way, right? I'm not negating any of that. That is horrible. But for the sake of the perspectives to understand patterns of what we're already seeing here of this transition, we get to ask a couple of other questions. So another interesting question here is, I talked a little bit earlier about stability in an economy versus, or even in an industry versus volatility or a bit more or a bit less stability, I want to say. And here again, you can I'm encouraging you to listen to a couple of the recent statements or speeches, even if it's like press interviews or something of Donald Trump, and go beyond the filter of your own opinion, which can be either direction, right? But allow to observe what he's saying, because no matter what you think about him or your opinion, political opinion, doesn't matter at all. But if there's one thing that we have learned ever since he came back into office, is that with him, you get what he says, independent from an opinion that you have, but just to observe the patterns. He is a lot of times, and that has been proven already, just plainly saying what he's going to do or what's going to happen. And so the last interviews over the last 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days, when I tapped in here and there and just like, let me listen to what he says. Let me see what I can catch. One narrative that he has been stressing, and I'm sure this is very set in a strategic way. He keeps talking about what he wants or what the US wants as an intention for Iran is for after the war, after there has been made a deal, some sort of a conclusion and a resolution, he wants an outcome of a stable economy in that country. And he always keeps adding in the Middle Eastern region. Obviously, the reasons for that are multi-layered. And also, obviously, this is also always connected to advantages for the US economy. The other thing in the interview I heard this morning, he said, is my whole life is about deals. And guess what? Obviously, what have we seen him do ever since he came into office? In a bold way, in a loud way, in a disruptive way, deal making. And again, whatever opinion you have, observe the pattern. Observe the pattern. So what does he want to do? That ties back to when we in the beginning looked at power structures, where we're going to move. He also keeps talking about sovereign nations and sovereign decisions, sovereign deal making, what we will see more and more in the future. In order for that, what is required, or who would maybe not want that, who just profit from instability, and in particular in that region, whether that's only Iran or whether that's the whole Middle East, because obviously which economy is mostly connected to that area is the oil industry and the energy industry, connected to everything oil. Also, there's more derivatives and other products around that. And what we don't really see that much in the media is, yes, we have the sheer oil as the raw material, which is obviously a full industry connected to energy produced from it, etc. And then there is another part where there's a lot of trade happening, which is the actual trading around everything oil. If you look at the pure financial markets around oil, the trading where people bet on the oil price going up or down, this is very fragmented. We could do a whole episode just around this, and I'm not the best expert to dive deep. But think about it. If you be a trader and you live from shortening or longing a position or from this sector in the industry, and if there's a lot of stability in this because the price of oil and energy is more or less stable, then there's not much that you can make money on, because the more stability is in there, the less the market moves. And I've seen an article somewhere where somebody stated from that, and by the way, there's a lot of this happening through London. That might become interesting a little bit later when we see what happened alongside the history of the last 150 years. So remember, a lot of these trade deals are running through London. Power of London, of the UK, part of NATO, part of an infrastructure that is, for this particular part here, not really happy to have a lot of stability in that region. It's just one of the reasons, okay? That is what we can also see. And then with England, or the UK in particular, there's also interesting things going on, and please do your own research. I'm also going to link, as always, underneath the episode here, several links. I cannot link everything that I've been reading, but I'm trying to provide as many links as I can for the different topics so you can have a starting point for your own research. But what I've also seen is that the UK, apparently, very interestingly, is financing and coordinating some of the attacks on power plants and energy producing sectors in Russia. So in the media, it looked like it was Ukraine attacking, but when it was addressed, and they didn't even deny it when they were confronted with it in an interview by the Russians then, apparently did not believe that the attack came from Ukraine. The respective parties in London responded and did not even deny it. So it's another interesting thing that you can have in mind, that there's also some friction going on and interests from one or the other party that then interestingly are tied around what is happening in the Middle East region. So you may want to ask your question or do your own research more if you want. Who profits or who does not profit from a stable or an unstable Middle Eastern region? What happened if that whole region had complete peace, no more struggles, everything settled, everything in peace. What would the world look like if that was possible and if that could happen? So with that, I'm ending the summary part. We're now a little bit more than half an hour, I think, 35 minutes. So that is the first layer that I wanted to give you to have additional perspectives alongside these 4 different layers and dimensions. And what we're going to look into now is 7 steps. So we're going to collapse the last 150 years into 7 different steps. Okay. So also, I don't want to make this a history lesson, but we want to connect what I said in the beginning, the layers of what happened when, emerging technology layers, the resource or power struggles, like what happened, the monetary shifts connected to it, political world order shift, and where does it potentially tie back to what we see now. So it's helping you to have additional perspectives and also to anchor in what we see and what is happening right now into a bigger context that helps you understand where we're at in this transitional phase. All right. Please also feel free to share this episode with anyone that you feel might benefit from this. Comment underneath the episode here if you can, depending on where you listen to this. And obviously follow and like this so this helps that more people can find it. And with that, I'm closing. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening. I hope you really feel inspired and you gain new perspectives for your own ventures to take action. Remember to subscribe to the podcast, download the episode, and share it with one visionary person who needs to also hear this. Also, please leave a 5-star review if that feels aligned on iTunes or on Spotify. That helps to distribute the podcast to more people and to have high caliber guests on for you to enjoy.